Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's super exciting to have so many people register for this webinar, and I think it's just proven how hot this topic is, and I just can't wait to dive into this deeper. And we have just the right panel to unpack this question. So by the end of this webinar, you'll know exactly what to do to get the early traction for a women's health startup, which is the topic of today's webinar. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Tatiana. I'm a director of FemTech Lab Accelerator, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. But for those who are new to our community, who haven't been to our webinars before or our in-person events in London, let me introduce what FemTech Lab is. We are a global platform for innovators and disruptors in women's health space. Our goal is to innovate this amazing wave of products and innovations to support the founders and help them take their products to market and fundraise. We run 2 cohorts a year in spring and autumn, and our founders are supported by an incredibly strong network of over 200 mentors, leading industry experts, corporate partners, over 300 investor partners. And we have also recently launched an Angels Club to support angel investment into women's health. So lots of exciting initiatives. And coming back to the topic of this webinar, I'm excited to be joined by this incredible panel. So and also all of our mentors on the panel are, all of our experts on the panel are FemTech Lab mentors, and we also have our alumni, which is super exciting. Okay, so let me start by introducing Meg. So Meg is, in addition to being a FemTech Lab alumni, she is a founder of Postpartum Plan, on a mission to revolutionize postpartum care. And Postpartum Plan is a one-stop shop for emotional and physical recovery via online resources, live sessions with experts, and a thriving community. And Meg knows probably everything there is to know about building partnerships and growing new business through partnerships, and also creating an amazing pre-launch strategy. So I can't wait to dive deeper into that. We are also joined by Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining the panel. Nicole is a head of marketing at Apricity, the next generation fertility clinic. Nicole specializes in marketing, go-to-market strategies, and also she knows so much about partnerships and B2B partnerships. We are in great company. She previously was a chief marketing officer at Bayer Fertility, and also a strategic partnerships and head of marketing for Clue. So 2 brands, FemTech brands that probably everybody knows about. And Nicole has been with FemTech Lab as a mentor from pretty much day one. She's been supporting our startups in building their marketing strategies and partnership strategies. So thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today as well. We also are joined by Anna. Probably there isn't a person in FemTech or women's health who doesn't know Anna, or haven't come across, or had been lucky to be supported by Ultraviolet agency. So Anna is a FemTech industry pioneer. She started at LV back in 2015, where she was the first communications hire, and quickly grew the brand across over 60 territories, leading the way in the FemTech marketing strategy. Since then, Anna created the FemTech creative agency, Ultraviolet. Check it out. And she advised brands like Thinks, Become, Doppel, VUCA, Mooncap, Womanizer, Soho House, the Eva Peel, and all of the startups here on the FemTech Lab. So we've been super lucky to have Yana with us. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Tata. So excited to have you. So Tata is representing a product strategy head on this panel. She's a product strategy and head of product strategy and operations at Picsart, which is a world's largest digital creation platform. And Tata is an expert at building community-led products and product strategy and how to create value and impact for every single user that you have. She works across companies from various sizes, from early stage startups like Pangaya to scale up unicorns and to large multinational companies like Nike. So I think we are in an amazing position to unpack and uncover the topic of getting early traction for a FemTech startup. Just before we dive in, let me see. Don't forget to add your questions to the chat, or even better, if you want me to see it, to the Q&A chat, because it's easier for me to see the questions there in all the conversations. So please add your questions. You don't have to wait until the end of the webinar. We'll be answering them as soon as we can. That's it. I think we can dive straight in. So with that, my first question would be, let's start with common challenges. So what are some of the common challenges that are faced by women's health startups in early stages, especially, and how can they overcome them? So let's start with Meg. Meg, as a founder of a FemTech startup that launched recently, what were the main challenges for you?
Yeah, so hi everyone, it's really lovely to be here around such great company. Yeah, I think maybe I bring the kind of smaller business side of things. So I guess there's two things for me on this, which is the bigger universal and then my own personal struggles. So the bigger universal is the fact that I believe that women's health actually isn't that well known. So, research into hormonal health actually hasn't really been done. A lot of scientific research is done on men or menopausal women. So our hormones in general seem to be a little bit of a wild west, which haven't really been touched as much. And I do a lot of training to corporate companies, and things like when I say, what's diastasis recti, what's amenorrhea, all these words, I'm left with blank faces. So I think actually I can see some nodding, which is crazy, right? Because it's 50% of the population have these things going on. So I think there's almost a challenge where you're trying to shift a societal narrative, which feels like you're kind of pushing a big rock up a hill. But that's quite exciting for people who are really passionate about it, because it means you get to shout quite loudly about things and almost create a bit of a buzz and a revolution. And then my own personal challenges, it'll be imposter syndrome, which, I'm sure there are lots of startups on here, people who might be doing the spring cohort, and just to say that we all get it, right? Like I get the imposter syndrome as a female founder from my kitchen table and a mum of three. There's all of that as well that I think comes into it too, which is why community is so important and partnerships are so important.
That's brilliant. And we'll dive into all of those during our conversation today. I've seen so many people nodding on that question. And Anna, you've worked with so many different brands, so many different startups. What have you seen as kind of the most common challenges so far?
I would absolutely agree with Meg. The reason, what I always tell people, the reason that I started Ultraviolet is because I could see two major challenges for FemTech brands. The first is education. So you're often selling a product to people that don't necessarily know they need it yet. So you have to do with this much bigger piece of education to your consumer before you can even think about getting them into your funnel, into your sales funnel, right? So lots of people don't even know that they have diastasis recti or PCOS or endometriosis, whatever it is. So you have to do this big piece of education. So that's a really massive challenge. The other really massive challenge, of course, which I'm sure lots of you have come across, is social media is a really difficult place to be if you're a femtech brand, if you're talking about the vulva, the vagina, the breasts, anything to do with our reproductive organs. Even if it's not super explicit, you can still find yourself being shadow banned or targeted or taken offline, or one of the big issues that we had at LV right at the beginning, bearing in mind this was 2015, right? So nobody was talking about the pelvic floor or really anything to do with our vaginal health or intimate health. So it was very difficult to get people to follow an Instagram account about pelvic floor health. Like, why would anyone want to be seen to be following that? So there's still a lot of stigma around these things. So finding, those are the three biggest challenges: stigma, education, and being shadow banned. And although I don't know if you've seen that, the Centre for Intimacy Justice has worked with Meta to get them to change their policies around sexual health advertising, most brands are still not actually seeing any real world changes yet. So it's still a really, really big challenge. So those would be the big three.
That's incredible how stigma still persists. We could continue to talk about it, and I hope that in the next years to come, this challenge will finally be solved. Nicole, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would. But first, I want to just say +1 to what Anna was saying about it's not even stigma. It's anything having to do with reproductive healthcare. I worked in contraception and period tracking for years, and I thought it was just the squeamish issues that were getting shadow blocked. But now I work in fertility, which is like the most visible, most well-funded, if you will, the like most family friendly of all of the healthcare topics in women's and reproductive health. And we have the same problem with shadow banning on Google, on Facebook, our ads everywhere. We get labeled as birth control or contraception, which also should not be shadow banned. But even for us, even family building, which is, completely socially acceptable, and one would hope destigmatized, still suffers because of the intimate nature of the work that we do. And I think that that's something to be really aware of. But the thing that I wanted to say is I think the biggest challenge with early stage startups is knowing where to start. When I talk to a lot of founders, and I think this connects to what Meg was saying about that imposter syndrome. When I talked to a lot of early stage founders, and when I worked for a pre-seed startup, a lot of it was there was so much to do and you can't do it all yourself. And so the thing that I would really say as, to early stage founders is the biggest thing is being confident that no one knows your business better than you do, right? You're going to get lots of generic business advice from somebody who doesn't think deeply about what you do every day, doesn't know what your goals are, doesn't know what you know about your market. And that's your edge, right? So being willing to question and being willing to listen to others is an important skill, but being able to know which advice to take and which advice not to take so that you can really keep true focus on your business is a lot like the work we all do for ourselves as individuals, right? And I think that's a skill we all have at the point that you become a founder. You've thought hard and made good decisions for yourself, and you can do the same thing for your business. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind.
Such an important topic, Nicole. Thank you so much for bringing it up. And I think Meg was noting it's one of the lessons our founders learn very quickly because of so many mentors, so much advice, different advice from investors as well. Sometimes it's conflicting advice, and you get lost if you don't have a core belief in what you're building exactly. Brilliant. And that brings me nicely to the next question. So you said that the most important thing is to know what to do and maybe not know what not to do. So here we are, we have an amazing FemTech product. We are just about to launch, or maybe we have launched. What do we do? What are the first kind of key steps that we need to think? What is the strategy that we need to think maybe before we launch? And is there a pre-launch strategy? How do we position our brand best to get those early customers? Would anybody like to jump in first?
I'm happy to go. This is go-to-market strategy, which is something I've done before. And I think the most critical thing is thinking critically about who your early user is going to be. So when you were trying to attract investment, or when you were writing, your business plan, you probably thought about the whole world of the market that you could possibly work on. And I think it was Anna who briefly brought up this idea that, you have to, in many FemTech products, you have to teach your user about the product that they're going to use, right? And there's a book that I highly recommend if this is an issue you're struggling with. It's called Crossing the Chasm, and it's all about the introduction of new products or products for which there isn't an established market. And the advantage that you have is if there isn't an established market, you probably don't have established competitors. But the bad news is you've got to go out and create that market yourself. And so when I was at Clue and we were introducing a new product, the question that we always asked ourselves is, who's going to love us for what we are with our early stage product, with our MVP, for whom can we solve an immediate product, an immediate problem or an immediate pain point so that they love us and give us the feedback we need. And, because you don't have the money for large scale user testing, you can't really launch a huge strategy, right? But all you need is your first couple users to start using you, giving you feedback, loving you, referring you to their friends. So knowing really critically who's going to love you and going after that really narrow group to the extent that you can. That's what I would really recommend, is getting to know that first set of users, your early adopters, really well.
I just want to jump in on that actually with a personal story, which I completely agree. And when I first launched Postpartum Plan in 2021, I had a very clear vision of who my customer was going to be. But what I also did is I launched my Instagram channel before I was actually ready. And I did that by mistake. But that was really useful because then my audience became someone that I didn't quite realize it would be. So that's also quite important as well, is sometimes people think they have to have everything perfect before they start, right? But actually getting yourself out there, as Matthew Syed says, doesn't he? He's like, you don't need to have it perfect, just get it out there. And I did, and I had my Instagram channel ready about a month before launch, and then people started to follow. And then a professional rugby player contacted me, and she said, "I'm pregnant, and this is exactly what I need because I really want to recover to get back on the pitch." Now, in all of my market research and my customer journeys, I had never put a professional rugby player or so actually sometimes that kind of market research that you can do at home is important, as well as actually just putting it out there and finding out who catches the line. And that dictated quite a lot of my recovery process and my sales messaging that I did for athletes.
Thanks very much, Meg. Tata, I can see you have unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to add here, do you agree a lot about knowing the early users? And one of the things I strongly believe in is that it's super important, and especially FemTech spaces, to go and build the community around yourself and build community around your product, because that's how you connect with people. And as Anna mentioned, there is a lot of stigma and a lot of lots of needs in education. And the way you do it, as simple as just organizing, one of my favorite ways to do customer development is to organize coffee chats with potential consumers and just meet with them once a week over a cup of coffee, and invite their girlfriends as well and discuss some of the topics. I am not working in FemTech. I've worked in health space, and there are a lot of stigmas there as well, way less than in female health. And recently, I started bringing up a lot of the topics with my friends and girlfriends and colleagues, and I realized that it's not very common to discuss some of the things. And I guess that the first barrier to go through is build that narrative, what you want to tell, the story you believe in, the product, how it's solving the issues which you see. And then when you have a narrative ready and you have an idea who your users are, go and try to pitch that narrative to those groups of users and just talk to people. Because once you start talking, once you start experimenting, you're going to find some interesting things. Like Meg found that there is a professional rugby player, right? I have had in product discovery sometimes also very interesting cases of like just meeting people who would be completely out of a target group I would ever imagine, but then they would be actually really good, solid user group to be part of the product. So I'd say build that narrative and then find a community and start building community. It could be in social media, it could be a physical offline community group, but that's super essential way before you start like actually shipping the product, delivering the product, having a website. Just have that network you can connect with and test the ideas with.
Thank you so much, Tata. Communities keep coming up as a most important, most kind of frequent question from our startups on the Accelerator as well. So we had great insights, Tata, from how to build a community. Anna, Nicole, is there anything you have seen, any strategies that worked in terms of building that community? What kind of worked, what didn't work?
100%. So, and I want to say community is a big word. And I think this can fall and I mean a loaded word in the sense that this can fall into that bucket of advice that I was talking about earlier, where everyone says, oh, you need partnerships, you need a community, you need this, you need that. but it's okay to start small, right? When you think back to what Meg was saying, I sort of accidentally launched my Instagram, and then, one day somebody followed me and it took off. Like it's okay to do a bunch of different things. So, and picking up on that community piece, your community doesn't have to be 3,000 people, 5,000 people. It doesn't really even have to be 300 people, right? It can be 30, it can be 50. But I think the key use of it, to what Tata was saying, is really quick feedback, early feedback. If you've got 30 dedicated users and they're going to help you get your first product out there and have it be something good and something that suits the need of, admittedly a small part of the market, but at least helps you get your first version out there in a way that can be successful, that's enough, right? It can be a WhatsApp group. And we had this discussion a lot when I was working for Bayer Fertility, which is a pre-seed startup here in the UK. We basically put up an email list and said, hey, our Calendly, sign up for user testing. And then we put people on our email list. And when we wanted feedback, we were shocked at the number of people who would sign up for those slots when we put something up. But that meant when we had a question, do you think the user cares about this? You would just open spots on the Calendly and they would fill. And we were shocked because everybody gets so much email marketing, but clearly people wanted to participate in the development of this product. They were really, really interested. And you don't need that many people if you only, frankly, especially if you're a 1 or 2 person team, what are you going to talk to? A handful of users a week, right? You don't need tons and tons of people. So, I 100% agree on community, but I think we have to be cautious that when we're talking about these things for the really early stage, when you're starting to get traction, it doesn't have to be big, right? It can just be enough. It's a focus group, right? And then one day, hopefully that focus group becomes a community that's part of your value, but it can be really quite small at the beginning.
Absolutely. And I would just add to that as well, that one of the things that I often say to startups right at the very beginning is to think for the lowest barrier to entry is really think about where your user already is. Where are they hanging out? Where are they spending time? Where are their spaces? Think about their day. If it is a new mum, what does her day look like? What are the tools that she's already using? What are the things she's already engaging in? And find them there so that your community doesn't have to be scrambling together an Instagram from zero necessarily. It can be finding people where they already are. Maybe that's IRL, maybe that's an email, maybe that's a WhatsApp group, so that you've got that really, really low barrier to entry to just make it super easy to connect with people. Think about that day journey, that week journey that they'll be having and where they're already spending time.
And I think in FemTech, the advantage that we have is a lot of the founders that we see start based on their own experiences, right? So what your journey as a postpartum mom looked like, what your journey as somebody with endometriosis looked like, right? So, we can build on our own experiences and our own groups of people that we already know. That's a superpower that you don't see in a lot of other fields. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the disadvantages of FemTech, but one of the advantages is, a lot of us are founders who are starting things out of real needs that we've experienced that others don't have. And we already, and sometimes have communities, have friends, have networks that are willing to pass the word along, because people aren't burned by, overburdened by overused marketing chains.
Thanks, Nicole. I can see somebody type in the Q&A. It's not really a question, but another suggestion that worked for them is a creation of a roundtable of C-suite female change makers who can also be who can critique and champion your solution. And I think it's important to know to kind of understand that in the first in those early days, you're not only getting users, but you also need to get the feedback on the product and to have the iterative product development process. So how important do you think is market research and that customer validation in the early days?
I mean, critical. I think it's come up already as one of the first things, right? Is, if you're not talking to your user right from the beginning and all the way to the end. I mean, I started my career in an 85,000 person company, and the CEO used to still meet with our users, right? That was the thing, because if you lose touch with what your users want, it's really hard to innovate in a meaningful way.
I'd agree. I think that, like I said, that was kind of my hustle, is that to starting an Instagram page, and actually it made me realize what people needed. And with my members, I regularly send out just a Google form. And it's just like, just tell me, how are you finding it? Is there anything I can do to improve? And, you know, at the beginning, I was getting like 20, 30 responses, but it really helped to build what I've made. And, you know, the business is very different from what it was to what it is now. I'd say the other thing in terms of market validation, not just your customer, but and going to what we're talking about with partnerships, I also used a business coach from the very beginning. And I think it's not just your customer, but it's also someone who potentially has a different view on your business as well. Because like I said, you know, I launched it from my kitchen table with a genuine need, because it was something that I believed that I needed when I had my first child, but I didn't have the business acumen and the financial know-how, etc. And having that person as well to bounce ideas off is really important. So yeah, I think I definitely come from this from a hustle point of view, which is just, I just asked so many people. I was like, just give me advice, just tell me tell me what you know, and building those partnerships as well, I think is really important.
I would agree that building the network and the partnerships with people is super important. If there are people who cannot afford having a business coach or don't have a network yet, there are a lot of founders communities, not necessarily in FemTech space, but still so many. And usually founders in tech space are super helpful, and people are willing to help, even dropping a LinkedIn message to someone and saying, look, I've seen you've launched this product, I'd like to chat. That's been really helpful for a lot of startups. And to be honest, myself, when I moved from corporate world to startup world, I realized that I didn't know how things operate, and it was immensely helpful. Speaking of market research, we all would agree and nod 3,000 times how important that is. And I guess that market research is sometimes something which might push you in different ways, like the product could change over time, but also what you target on market you target. It was a startup which I was mentoring in a previous cohort, and the initial target was to go B2C, but there was a lot of a struggle because fertility is sort of a taboo topic in India, and business was struggling to grow. And while we were working with the founder, we realized that actually there might be good B2B opportunity. So the market would be actually a little bit different. So it's also important to keep that open mind. And when you do the market research, think all possible ways, and then try to brainstorm ideas, and then try to pitch different markets, because sometimes you think it's just one way, but then you actually find traction, not in B2C world, but in B2B world, or vice versa. So I would also say that that sort of a market research might show you that there is no traction, but it doesn't mean that there is no way. If you feel that it's right and you feel that product is needed, most probably there is a way, you just need to find a way around it.
That's a great insight. Thank you so much, Tata. So we're getting some questions in the Q&A, and the first one is about getting traction for not like super early, but when you already have a working MVP, 200 plus active users, some prospects. What are the strategies that you can kind of employ to grow further? And it's a common kind of chicken and egg thing from investors. They always ask for more traction. How do you get traction before you get investment to invest in proper marketing? So maybe there are some innovative marketing strategies that you can share for not on day one, but maybe day 10 of the startup.
That's certainly one I can speak to. You know, I think that's the position that we were in at Baya, where we had a couple hundred, but not not a ton of space, not a ton of money to grow. And that's where things like email marketing or organic social are a really good way to build your number of users. But what that takes is, what you don't have in money, you have to make up for in creativity, right? How can you get something that is shareable? How do you get something that makes other people want to invite? Those are the really critical things. So, they don't have to be long emails, but they have to be regular. People have to see value in them. All that costs is a MailChimp subscription, right? Which is not that expensive. Or a TikTok channel or an Instagram channel or some way of keeping regular communication with your users. Focus on growing those things that don't cost a lot of money. And that would really be my suggestion. Events also, it depends on your kind of business, but if you can do events that aren't that expensive, especially, weather's getting nicer, you can do stuff outdoors, right? Like those are the kinds of things that get more people interested, and you know, you can show to your investors as traction. Though the one word of caution I would give is try to get a sense from your investors to help, from potential investors, to help you put some KPIs on really what would move the needle, because, and really do try to push them as much as you can to be specific with numbers. Like, what would, you know, what number of Instagram followers would look impressive to you? What number of people on an email list would really make a difference to your decision to invest? Because it's really easy for an investor to say, I don't know, maybe some social followers, but like, try to get them to think about it a little bit. Like, would that actually move the needle on you? Because sometimes I have found in investor discussions, they give an answer, but they themselves don't actually know that their real discomfort is with something else. But it's really easy to say, we want more traction. We want more traction may mean I don't really believe in your product. And that's something you want to know, because 500 Instagram followers instead of 200 is not going to change that for them.
Definitely. And figure out if it's, you know, if you've already got users, is it conversions that they want to see? Is it length of usage? Is it a number of times they check it? Whatever, you know, I don't know anything about the product, but knowing what those KPIs need to be is really important. And the other thing is, look at how, you know, always, especially in the very early days, I always try and keep things as simple as possible, and look at how you got to that point and replicate what's working for you already. And don't try, you know, we talked about this briefly earlier about getting so much advice from so many different other people. You know, if everyone's on TikTok, it doesn't mean you have to be on TikTok. You know, if everyone's on Instagram, it doesn't mean you have to be on Instagram. Where's your existing user, and where are they coming from, and how are they coming to your product? And just replicate the shit out of that, because that's really what's going to be the lowest common denominator for you. And don't try and necessarily reinvent the wheel, or, you know, try and do what other people are doing. Just look at how your users are getting to you and just push that as much as you can.
Thanks, Anna. So we have one more question about building a community on Facebook. So they are creating resources for endometriosis, but haven't had trouble sharing that information or building communities on Facebook. There are a lot of groups, reach out to admins, try to post info, things get deleted, and I'm finding we get ignored by admins. Ended up with having in a group where people are not very active. So is there an advice on how to get into existing groups or create your own groups where people are kind of relevant and feel engaged?
I think that's the same thing I was just saying. I mean, why Facebook then, if Facebook's such a challenge? If that's not where you're getting any traction, if you're just banging on a door that's not opening, just move on. And I would say that Facebook groups are a bit of a strange one now as well, depending on your market. In the UK particularly, it's a very specific type of user that's in a Facebook group now, that's active in Facebook groups. Is that your target audience? Maybe try and figure out who your target audience is, figure out where they are already spending time, and I would focus on those spaces. If Facebook is not working for you, I would just ditch it altogether and find somewhere else.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. One more question about how perfect does your product need to be before launching? And I think Meg has touched on that with her personal experience. If the product isn't perfect, will this backfire, or should you get feedback and work on it physically?
I can't, because I don't know what the product is. But just from my personal experience, I came up with the idea of Postpartum Plan, and I typed postpartumplan.co.uk into Google, nothing existed. I typed postpartum plan into Instagram, nothing existed. So I was like, shall I just do this then? And I definitely had an idea. I knew what I wanted to create. But what it was when I launched in May 2021 is very different to February 2023. And I never would have known that unless I launched. I can't tell you what to do because I don't know what your product is, and of course get feedback, but it's chicken and egg, isn't it? How can you get feedback without putting it out there? So do you do focus groups first? Do you get a couple of users? You know, I definitely did that when I first started it. Just before I launched, there were a few people that I knew that were pregnant, about to have a baby. I was like, here's free access, let me know what you think, tweaking it beforehand. But if you've got an idea, go for it. And actually, sorry, there is someone who wrote a question, and I said, I'll answer it, and it's moved to answered from Claire, who says, any thoughts on how to gear up to take the leap from employed with an idea to creating the startup? And just go for it. If you've got passion behind you, then do it. But what I would say is that it's a lot more work than I realized. So I just want to be realistic. You know, if I'd known how much work it was, I probably would have taken a little bit more time to think about it. So it is a lot of work. But it is completely worth it if you've got passion and you know that you're creating something that actually helps to change people's lives.
I can jump in here about the physical product because I see the downsize clothing, and I managed to launch a startup which was a fashion sustainability brand called Pangaya. And that's the question we have been asking ourselves, if I should actually go for it and launch it when the things are not perfect. And especially when you are in a founding team or you're part of like a very early stage group, you want everything to be perfect before you launch it. But there are a lot of problems and every sample costs a lot of money. So what we have decided to do is actually, obviously the product should look good and have the quality which is acceptable by yourself, not necessarily the perfect one, and just launch it and get the user feedback and be very honest in the communication. So what we were telling our potential customers is that, look, we're trying to be as sustainable as possible. We have managed to secure this amount of materials which are sustainable. We're working to substitute the rest. And we have just started this company. So if you have any feedback about the product, please let us know. And we were giving the product to try to a lot of our family, friends, etc., to test the product and give us feedback first. Then we launched it to pre-sale and just doing the early trials and tests. And then only after that, we launched like proper sales channel when we were able to see what is the feedback coming. And there was some feedback coming, like I remember that the t-shirt was too narrow. It was impossible to get through hats for some of the people. I would never guess because I'm pretty tiny. And for me, it was completely okay. And for the founder as well, she was also very small. But then apparently for a lot of a taller woman, it was actually really hard. And that was a really good feedback we managed to incorporate really early on. So I would say, don't wait for a perfect moment. Just get it to the level where you feel okay and you feel comfortable sharing that with at least friends and family, and then start promoting the product, and the feedback is going to come. And as Mac mentioned, you don't know how the product is going to evolve. 2 years from now, it might be not clothing, it might be something else, or it could be some part of a clothing you have never thought of before.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tata. So let's move on to the other a big aspect of growing startup, partnerships. So how important are partnerships in building that traction? Should we start looking as an early stage FemTech startup at partnerships first, or like at which stage should that become a strategy? Nicole, looking at you.
Yeah, fair enough. And anyone who's done my FemTech Lab workshop on partnerships will 100% know what my answer to this is, which is it depends what your business is and it depends what your strategy is. I think this is definitely one of those areas where there's a lot of pressure from well-meaning advisors. You should have partnerships, you should have partnerships, you should have partnerships. And partnerships are a lot more work than they look. And they're also outside of your control, right? They take a lot of time, and they really only give you anything if they take off. And so my feeling is, or my approach for early stage startups, and actually all the way up, right? You should only be doing a partnership if you've got a really good reason why, right? That can be something that you can't do yourself that another partner can do, something that another business where you can offer something and they need something. So there's sort of the whole is greater than the sum of their parts, but you should really be thinking about, why am I doing a partnership? And doing a partnership for the sake of a partnership is never worth it. It's like a relationship, right? I mean, it is. A partnership is a relationship, right? It's not just a business tool, it's a relationship. And, if you are going into a partnership because you feel like you should, I mean, think about going into a relationship because you think that you should. Is that likely to get you the output that you were hoping for? Probably not. So I would definitely be thinking about the why of a partnership. And if your only answer is, well, because somebody said partnerships are important, then really be thinking about is like every other area of your business, right? Like, you've got an extremely limited amount of time and an extremely limited amount of resources. And, partnerships, I think at the early stage, unless a really wonderful opportunity presents itself, are probably not critical to your growth path. And so probably not your first priority. And I say that as someone who makes their living doing partnerships.
That's incredible. And Nicole, your partnerships webinar workshop on the program is one of the top performing ones, right there, along with Anna and Tata's. Meg, I want to bring you in this conversation because I know you've done amazingly and you have so much to share on the B2B partnerships, especially.
Yeah, so for me, partnerships have been really good, but I've had a very clear to what Nicole said. Nicole's video live was very good for me when during the cohort. So I've got two different channels of partnerships. So one is B2B partnership. So I've now shifted Postpartum Plan to an employee benefit. So I now partner with businesses to give Postpartum Plan to its employees as an employee benefit. So that has been very successful for me. And that has, as everything with Postpartum Plan for me, it's been about hustle. You just find that first company that takes a punt, wants to do something that you see that they really see value in, and then you take the steps from there. But you have to be very, very clear on the businesses that you also want to work with, and the types of businesses that you want to work with. And so I think having a very solid contract, very solid idea of how you work together. If you partner, I'm allowed to use your logo, I'm allowed to promote it. I'm not a secret employee benefit that you've got behind the scenes, because that doesn't work for me. So that's one element. So B2B partnerships in terms of creating it as a employee benefit has been successful. But the second side of it has been just business partnerships in general. So I've developed partnerships with the likes of Thriver, which is home blood testing, and Time Private Healthcare, Foresights Physio, Blue Sky Coaching, which is a law firm business coaching. And that has just been me. Anyone that's reached out to me, I've always been like, yeah, let's grab 30 minutes just to hear what they have to say. And sometimes they're selling to me, but sometimes they're actually like, I see real potential with us partnering. And that has really amplified my business, because now I can go to law firms and say, but I also work with a specific legal back to work coach. And that has really helped to attract Postpartum Plan to certain corporates, but it also gives me something to say. So partnering with a new business, like adding a bolt-on onto Postpartum Plan, I'm slowly growing the business. And therefore just gives me, as Nicole was saying about newsletters or, just getting that traction out there, it just gives me another thing to shout about, and shows that I'm partnering with bigger businesses that kind of help me build my reputation. So for me, partnerships has worked very well, but I think Nicole's right. You don't just partner with anyone just for the sake of it. I wouldn't partner with a gambling company because that has no connection to Postpartum Plan at all. Everything I do has to feel like it's connected to revolutionizing postpartum health.
Thanks, Meg. It's something that takes it's a long sales cycle, so it takes a lot of your time, a lot of your thinking, and yeah, it needs to be right for you if you're going to be spending your time in it. Thanks, Meg. So feel free to add your questions. We still have about 15 minutes. Before we start wrapping up, I have one more question to Anna on the communication strategy. And every time, whenever we start thinking and talking about growth and traction, obviously there are lots of things we can do that's paid. What would be maybe your three top things that you would advise that we can do to grow organically?
So I always recommend a little bit of a mixture of paid and organic, and that's partly because you can gather really interesting data from both of them, and you can get quite quick feedback from paid, even if you just put in very, very low costs right at the very beginning, and you can actually just learn and iterate quite early on if you're running them side by side. But ultimately for the free stuff, there is a lot you can do, and we talk about community, which is a huge part of it. Social media is there, it's free for everyone, but it's not done easily. And I think sometimes, particularly when you're a founder and you're a really small team and you've got so many other things, you're iterating in your product, you're trying to speak to investors, you're trying to, build a team. Social media specifically can get kind of put to the bottom of the list and is seen as an afterthought, and you often get interns dealing with it, or the most junior team member is dealing with it, and it is your front of house, it's your shop front essentially. People go to an Instagram before they go to a website often. So making sure that you've got, even if it's just very beautifully curated without loads and loads of content, making sure that all of those things are kind of in line and are very clear, so that when people do go to all those different channels, it's a very, very clear message. They know exactly who you are and exactly what you're doing. All those things are really important. People often talk about PR as well. Now, PR could be lots of different things. Again, it doesn't have to be speaking to the Daily Mail. It doesn't have to be speaking to the Evening Standard. It can be finding those very specific communities and those very, very loud voices in very, very niche places. And I would hope that if you're building a business in this area, in whatever area you're in, you have a bit of visibility and understanding about who those voices are, who are those really key stakeholders. It could be a mum in a community group who just is particularly loud and vibrant and is quite influential. It could be a blogger, it could be somebody writing about it, it could be a journalist. But building those relationships really early on can really help you to grow into new spaces and into new markets. So I do think it's always worth looking at that, but not necessarily thinking about it in the more traditional sense of PR, and looking at who of those big voices in your space, so you can start tapping into them, build relationships with them, and ultimately hopefully get them to become evangelists as well. And then the final piece, I think I actually saw a question about this in the Q&A. Your early advocates, make them part of your sales team. Give them, incentivize your customer to shout about your product. And it could be lots of things. It doesn't have to be, I'm not talking cash here, but just reasons why. It could just be, help us build, help us figure this out. We're trying to change the world. You're part of our early plan. How can we get this to more people? How can we get this into your communities, and really use them as part of your growth strategy? Quite often when we're dealing with these issues in FemTech, we all feel very, very passionately about it, because these are things that we've suffered with for a very long time and we haven't seen solutions. So people tend to be very, very loud. We've heard from a lot of the panelists here about experiences that they've had with really, really loud and evangelizing early customers. So use that to your advantage.
Fantastic. Thank you for fantastic summary, Anna. Thank you so much. Just had a question come through from Jack. They are an app to find female only and LGBT only working groups. They're using different marketing strategies to attract users, better users, launched in Cardiff, currently using social media, but want to get more attention locally. They are planning to set up a table to answer questions, film interviews, holding signs in the city to draw attention to the app. Also have some news stories in the pipeline, hope to push to people to our app. What other marketing means they can use for local user acquisition?
I think this is an interesting one. Oh, sorry, Nicole. All I was going to say is that because I launched Postpartum Plan in lockdown, I actually love to see that people are doing stuff IRL, because I had to do everything virtually. And this, to me, Jack, it sounds like you've got loads of great ideas. But that's, it's lovely to do the face-to-face and see the eye contact and meet the people that you're targeting. So to me, that sounds like you're doing some great stuff already.
It does. And the only thing I would say is, since you seem like you're open to doing a lot of different things, this actually is one of those areas in which partnerships might help a lot, because you've got a really specific problem you're not able to solve yourself. And that's getting to a really small group of people. I mean, needles in a haystack, right? But this is something where partnerships might help. We're going to meetups for already existing women's groups or LGBTQ groups, or I think it was Anna earlier who was talking about finding users where they are, thinking about where your user is, not just locally in the city of Cardiff, but where are these groups meeting? Where are they already talking? Where are the hubs for where they exist? And if you're specifically looking for people who are walkers, like maybe like looking in some of the walking clubs, thinking about the organizations that already exist around this, joining their Facebook groups, getting involved in their communities is really a way to find the specific kind of users you're looking for. It's the old school way of putting filters on your performance marketing.
I love that. Thank you so much, Nicole. Right, so we have 8 minutes, and I would like to wrap up with a kind of final piece of wisdom from our panel. What advice would you give to the startups innovating in women's health to get that early few customers, to get that attraction off the ground? How can you summarize? Tata, maybe you can start.
I think that first, you all are doing an amazing thing. Like this is an area which needs a lot of smart, brilliant people like yourself just going there and starting creating products. And we have talked a lot about how underrepresented it is, how not enough attention it has. My piece of advice about launching and getting traction of an early stage startup is launching it. I think that we all tend to think too much, not have the feel that the product is ready, not necessarily go and talk to the users. That the step, I think, is the most important one of just starting and showing the product to the first 2 people, giving it to test, like what Meg said. She went to a few people she knew who was pregnant and gave her the plan. And that is actually going to motivate you a lot to move forward, because as soon as you hear feedback, as soon as you hear the user saying, oh, this is actually what I needed, or maybe you could improve this, that is going to have give you that motivation to continue. And I think the first traction with the first users is something extremely important, and like building that initial steps and that small community, which we're talking about, not millions of users or huge following, but like getting your first 50, 100 users who are those early adopters, that's super important.
I 100% agree. And I think I think Anna's advice was the best one, which is really going where your users are, go to them. Right. And I think it's so easy, especially in the digital age, to be sitting here going like, oh, Facebook will find me my users, Instagram will find me my users, someone will find me my users. But at this stage, like the reality is the person who's going to find your users is you. And being open to doing that in whatever means gets you that first set of users, that budding little community that we talked about. Like, I think that's the first way to go. And then you get to ask the next question, which is, how do I grow beyond my early adopters? But really finding your early adopters in the place where they already are, that's I think the number one thing that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keep it simple as well. Don't try and don't spread yourself too thin. If you think that your user is going to be on TikTok or Instagram, just focus on one of those. Just double down, focus on it. If it's working, fantastic. You can use that information. You can use those learnings to replicate or to inform your strategies on your other channels. And if it's not working, ditch it and move on to the next one. But don't start Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, everything else all at the same time and wonder why you're not getting anywhere and why you've just got a couple of users on each. So and ditto, don't do CPC and SEO and email and in-person and event, and just really just try each channel and learn it, understand it, figure out what's working for it within that channel for your user. And if it's not working, just ditch it completely. And if it's working, you can use that information to inform your next one.
+1.
Brilliant.
So I'd agree on all of that. Like when I have on my signups, where did you hear from us? And it's always Instagram. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to go onto Facebook. because also I'm a busy mum, so I also just don't really have the time. So exactly what Anna and everyone has said, it's like if you channel and you really focus on one place and build a community there, it's like friendships, right? You can't have loads of friends scattered all over the place. You're not really investing in those friendships then. And then the other thing I would say, as probably if people here are, thinking of starting a company or an early stage, that is me. And, I was that nervous person kind of dipping my toe in, and I was on my own. I'd accost my husband on the way when he was going to the loo to ask him questions, because I just, I had no one to talk to, poor guy. And so I just started reaching out to people and asking people. And actually the path that leads you on is pretty amazing. I would caveat there with exactly what Nicole said, which is you have to stay true to yourself and take all of that amazing advice and then sit with it. Don't do a jerk reaction. I did that and I made some mistakes. I think Chaz asked that question about mistakes in partnerships. I did a free trial for a couple of weeks because someone told me to do it, and it just didn't work. And actually it just belittled my product. So I then stopped that. But reaching out to people and asking for support, because you never know where that's going to lead. Because I asked someone for support who then put me in touch with a back to work coach, who's now the back to work coach on Postpartum Plan, who offers return to work coaching for our members. So you never know where those partnerships may lead. They may lead to nothing. They may lead to something that you didn't expect.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. Thank you so much, Meg, Tata, Anna, Nicole. It's been fantastic to have you on this panel. I think we can continue unpacking this complex issue for much longer. And it's been a pleasure to have you and talk to you and see you again. Thank you once again. Thank you everybody for dialing in and asking your questions. I hope it was useful for you. Kate shared some useful links. Sign up to our newsletter. Ultraviolet and Anna is issuing a fantastic trend report that is must have for everybody operating in the industry. And keep in touch, and see you at our next event.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.